This is another sign of the times, a commentary and an analysis. Occupy Wall Street movement growing. Protesters in at least 4 U.S. cities supporting the growing anti-Wall Street movement were arrested after refusing to obey police orders to leave public areas, including at least 175 people in Chicago, where the arrests brought a new phase of civil disobedience, organizers there said. The arrests were mostly peaceful and came as a contrast to earlier demonstrations where protesters took care to follow laws in order to continue protesting Wall Street's role in the financial crisis and other grievances about economic injustice. The arrests came after a day of protest in cities around the world, where tens of thousands gathered to rally against what they see as corporate greed. Most of those marches Saturday were largely non-confrontational, although dozens were arrested in New York when police moved to contain overflowing crowds or keep them off private property. 2 officers in New York were injured and had to be hospitalized. Some protests grew violent. In Rome, rioters hijacked what had been a peaceful gathering and smashed windows, tore up sidewalks, and torched vehicles. Repair costs were estimated at least at $1.4 million, the mayor said Sunday. In addition to the arrests in Chicago, 46 people in Phoenix were arrested for misdemeanor criminal trespass after refusing to leave a park. Phoenix police spokesman Sergeant Trent Crump said, "The police said some protesters were arrested after they remained in a Tucson, Arizona park past the 10:30 p.m. closing time. An exact number wasn't available. In Colorado, at least 24 people were arrested for refusing to move out of the street at a rally that attracted hundreds to downtown Denver," police said. In Chicago, some 500 people had set up camp at the entrance to Grant Park on Saturday evening after a protest earlier in the day involving some 2,000 people. Police said they gave protesters repeated warnings after the park closed at 11 p.m. and began making arrests when they refused to leave. Police also asked protesters to take down their tents before beginning to cut them down to clear their area, police said. The decision to stay in the park was very much a choice and calculated, said Randy Powell, a 27-year-old student. The tactic to occupy a city park has been used in other places, with local officials often working to accommodate them. In Minneapolis, sheriff's deputies tore down makeshift tents at a county government plaza but made no arrests, Minnesota Public Radio reported. Though the protesters are allowed to stay on the plaza all night, tents are banned. In New York, 24 people were arrested when demonstrators entered a Citibank branch and refused to leave, police said. They asked the branch to close until the protesters could be taken away. Earlier, as many as 1,000 demonstrators also paraded to a Chase Bank branch, banging drums, blowing horns, and carrying signs decrying corporate greed. A few went inside the bank to close their accounts, but the group didn't stop other customers from getting inside or seek to blockade the business. Chase Bank is making tons of money off of everyone, while people in the working class are fighting just to keep a living wage in their neighborhood, a 29-year-old United Auto Workers organizer said. Police told the marchers to stay on the sidewalk, and the demonstration seemed fairly orderly as it wound through downtown streets. The day culminated in an event in the city's Times Square, where thousands of demonstrators mixed with gawkers, Broadway showgoers, tourists, and police to create a chaotic scene in the midst of Manhattan. "Banks got bailed out. We got sold out," protesters chanted from within police barricades. Police, some in riot gear and mounted on horses, tried to push them out of the square and onto the sidewalks in an attempt to funnel the crowds away. Throughout the U.S., from several dozen people in Jackson, Mississippi, to some 2,000 each in Pittsburgh and Chicago, the protest movement gained momentum. Nearly 1,500 people gathered for a march past banks in downtown Orlando, Florida. Hundreds marched on a key bank branch in Anchorage, Alaska, and declared it should be foreclosed. In Colorado, some 1,000 people rallied in downtown Denver to support Occupy Wall Street, and at least 24 were arrested. Occupy Wall Street rallies drew young and old, laborers and retirees. In Pittsburgh, marchers included parents with children and strollers. The peaceful crowd stretched for 2 or 3 blocks. "I see our members losing jobs. People are angry," said Janet Hill, 49, who works for the United Steelworkers Labor Union, which she said hosted a sign-making event before the march. A retired teacher said at a demonstration in Milwaukee that he had grown angry watching school funding get cut at the same time banks and corporations gained more influence in government. The 81-year-old wants to see tighter Wall Street regulation. Around him, protesters held signs reading, "Keep your corporate hands off my government," and "Mr. Obama, tear down that Wall Street." In Canada, demonstrators gathered in cities across the country, from Halifax, Nova Scotia, to Vancouver, British Columbia, with hundreds of people protesting in the heart of Toronto's financial district. Some protesters spent the night at parks in Toronto and several other cities. Overseas, tens of thousands, nicknamed the Indignant, marched in cities across Europe, as the protests that began in New York City linked up with long-running demonstrations against government cost-cutting and failed financial policies in Europe. Protesters also turned out in Australia, Asia, and South Africa, among other places. Yes, there's a revolution coming. In other words, everything that must change quickly or rapidly. And these are more signs of the end times, transition days, which is a time of extraordinary changes, happenings, and events. Everything is connected, and everything is numbered, because it's also about what kind of world are we leaving to the future generations. Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 13. O thou that dwell upon many waters, abundant in treasures, thine end is come, and the measure of thy covetousness and greediness. 14. The Lord of hosts has sworn by himself, saying, Surely I will fill thee with humans, as with caterpillars, and they shall lift up a shout against thee. 15. He has made the earth by his power, he has established the world by his wisdom, and has stretched out the heaven by his understanding. 16. When he utters his voice, there is a multitude of waters in the heavens. He causes the vapors to ascend from the ends of the earth. He makes lightnings with rain, and brings forth the wind out of his treasures. 17. Every human is brutish by his knowledge. Every founder is confounded by the graven images, for his molten image is falsehood, and there is no breath in them. 18. They are vanity, the work of errors. In the time of the visitation they shall perish. Revelation chapter 10, verse 5. And the angel which I saw stand upon the sea and upon the earth lifted up his hand to heaven. 6. And swore by him that lives forever and ever, who created heaven and the things that therein are, and the earth and the things that therein are, and the sea and the things which are therein, that there should be time no longer. 7. But in the days of the voice of the seventh angel, when he shall begin to sound, the mystery of God should be finished, as he has declared to his servants, the prophets. Yes, it's time for all these things to happen, for all prophecy to be fulfilled. And all these things are more signs.